Hi, this is Gary Dranow from Park City, Utah, and the Gary Dranow Show, proudly broadcasting to you from Radio Evolve Rocks in Santa Barbara, California. Listen more and evolve. Welcome to the Gary Dranow Show, where we dive deep into the people and the stories that shape the soundtrack of our lives. I'm your host, Gary Dranow, songwriter, producer, and lifelong student of the art that moves the human spirit. Today, I have a very special guest, someone whose name is woven into the history of modern music, Danny Goldberg. And he has worked in the music business since the late 1960s as a journalist, publicist, record company president, artist manager, and mentor. He's managed some of the most important and influential artists of our time: Nirvana, Hole, Sonic Youth, Bonnie Raitt, and the Allman Brothers, just to mention a few. And he served as president or chairman of labels like Atlantic Records, Warner Brothers, Mercury, and Artemis. He's also got he also produced the Miami Vice soundtrack, co-founded Modern Records with Stevie Nicks, and co-directed the classic documentary No Nukes, starring Bruce Springsteen, Bonnie Raitt, and Jackson Browne. Today he runs Gold Village Entertainment, managing artists like Steve Earle, the Waterboys, and Martha Wainwright. He's the author of 6 books, including Serving the Servant, Remembering Kurt Cobain, and Bumping into Geniuses, My Life Inside Rock and Roll Business, which will be re-released in 2026 in an expanded version. His newest work, Liberals with Attitude, continues his lifelong advocacy of equality and justice. Quick note, Danny, welcome to the Gary Dranow Show. It's a true honor to have you on here.
Oh, Gary, thanks so much for having me.
And I'm the fortunate one, and my 745,000 plus subscribers are going to relish the pearls of wisdom you're going to drop along the way today. Danny, people that have worked with you, from Stevie Nicks to Kurt Cobain, all say the same thing, that you are a champion for the artist. The phrase comes up again and again in your story. You spent your entire career putting artists' visions first, ahead of the commercial, corporate, and even the trends. Where did that philosophy come from? A. B. How did you arrive at the belief that music, the art itself, always comes first?
Well, it started with me being a fan. I very much grew up in the late 1960s at a time when, the Doors, the Grateful Dead, and Bob Dylan, the Rolling Stones, and the Beatles,
Jimi
and
Hendrix.
Jimi Hendrix, and so many other great artists were forming, what they call the soundtrack of my life. And I stumbled into the business when I was 18 after dropping out of college because through an ad in the newspaper, I got a clerical job at Billboard, not really knowing what it was. And it turned out, as then as now, the trade magazine of the music business. And I realized there was this business that had jobs connected to the music that I loved. I never could play music or sing or anything like that, but I was a fan, and I once I realized you could make a living first giving your opinions about concerts and then later working for artists, I was determined to try to get my foot in the door. In terms of the idea of putting artists first, I mean, I always knew that they were the people making the music that I liked, and that all the other intermediaries were just kind of a means to that end. But when I was 22, I got a job doing publicity for Led Zeppelin through a PR company that had hired me because they wanted a long-haired guy that understood rock. And and my mentor, uh, in many ways, in terms of attitudes about the primacy of artists, was Led Zeppelin's manager, Peter Grant. Peter Grant was a much feared figure, a former professional wrestler, over
Oh,
300
yeah.
pounds, well connected with British gangsters. But he would do anything for Led Zeppelin, and he imbued in me that if you're going to work with him, it's all about what does the band wants. Don't care what the record company says, don't care what the promoters say or what the media says. It's the artists that come first, because without the artist, there's no business. And that, first of all, comported with my sense of proportion. And secondly, it gave me a lane, a role model of, okay, this is someone who does this for a living. He has a nice house. He's respected by the artists. They share jokes with him. He gets to go backstage and control who else goes backstage. And he's probably a good guy to learn from. So that was just sort of, I just always had him as kind of a North Star, even though I have a very different kind of background and operate in a different way at a different time. That yeah, if you're especially if you represent artists, then you got to advocate for what's best for them. And if you're at a record company, you've got to honor the fact that your business revolves around the creativity of these people. And artists, by and large, are a little different from the rest of us. They're generally speaking more sensitive. They're often people who didn't do great in high school or or weren't always great athletes, but they're tuned in to a level of sensitivity that allows them to do what they do. And
I
some,
guess I'm a bit of a freak because I grew up as a professional equestrian, motocross racer, tennis player, ski racer, but for 61 years I've been playing music. And just to get some background here, I'm 71. How old are you?
75.
Okay, so
So
now
you're a kid.
I'm a kid and you're not my dad.
No,
Um,
no, no.
so
But
is the manager, is he still alive or did he pass?
oh, Peter Grant passed about 20 years ago.
Okay. Um, you began as a music journalist writing for Rolling Stone, The Village Voice, and Billboard, even reviewing Woodstock in 1969. And by the way, recently I had on Mr. Velez, who was on playing percussion with Hendrix at Woodstock.
Far
Um,
out.
Yeah, I imagine that perspective, seeing music from the outside first, gave you deep respect for artists before you ever started managing them. Do you think the experience shaped the empathy you're known for?
It's so hard to know what shaped it. I mean, originally, just being a kid in high school was listening to the records and people like Dylan and the Beatles and Phil Oakes was a great favorite of mine, and just their humanity and their ability to put into words and through music and express feelings that I had. I just admired them. And I knew I wasn't one of them, so how to be useful, how to be part of that world, and the obvious thing to me was to be kind of an advocate for them because they often need help in business. They sometimes need just help as human beings. There's teams around all these successful artists. Some have bigger teams than others, but they all have somebody. And I just wanted to be one of those somebodies, both to feel good about what I was doing with my life and to have something to do. So being able to review the Woodstock Festival was kind of thrilling. I mean, I was just turned 19 and I was at Billboard then. The older writers who were like in their 30s, which at that time seemed ancient to me, didn't want to go. They liked assignments where they could get free drinks and dinners, and they were just a generational
Didn't want to
divide.
stand out in the rain and mud, huh?
Yeah, they didn't, so I was delighted to be asked to do it. And even though I was at a point in my life where I wasn't doing drugs anymore, I'd done quite a few of them when I was younger. And and I particularly the sort of the psychedelic idealism of like we're all one really infused the festival. I think the Woodstock movie is pretty accurate reflection of the vibe there, and I certainly wrote very enthusiastically about it for Billboard. And they put it on the front page. It was the first and only time I had an article on the front page of Billboard. So I think that was certainly a moment, but the real formative moments were when I was younger, just alone in my room listening to records that I loved. That's where I really emotionally saw this body of music as a sort of as something to as a light to follow.
Running Gold Mountain Entertainment through the 1980s, you were guiding careers from club stages to global audiences. What did those years teach you about protecting an artist's voice while navigating the business? And how did that shape your approach later at Atlantic, Warner Brothers, Mercury, and Artemis?
Well, by the time you're talking about, by the mid 80s, I was now in my mid 30s. I'd been around for a while. I'd done publicity for different artists. I wanted to be a manager, and the big thing initially was just to help them with their careers. Bonnie Raitt, for example, had been just after we started managing her. Myself, I had a partner in those days named Ron Stone. Um, had been was dropped by Warner Brothers Records, who she'd made all of her records for up until that point. She was getting close to 40. And a lot of the people who ran the record companies thought she was quote unquote too old. It's amazing to think because this was, 35 years ago, and she's probably bigger now commercially than she ever was. But it's a business that sometimes discards artists as they get into their late 30s or 40s. Bonnie needed somebody to fight for her, and we were able to get her a new record deal, and she really pulled herself together and did some of the best work of her life, including writing that song "Nick of Time." And she went from selling 60,000 records, which in those days was there was no streaming then. That was not a very good number, to
Yeah.
selling 4 million of Nick of Time, and kind of the rest is history. So,
And
the
and
best.
and she's a hell of a slide player.
Oh, an incredible guitarist, incredible singer, and a great presence on stage and a great figure in the musical culture, advocate for blues musicians. Shows up at so many benefits for free. We used to call them Bonnie Fits. It's just one of the great figures that the musical culture I've been part of has produced. And she's still out there doing it. I just spoke to her over the summer. You mentioned that book Bumping into Geniuses is being reissued, and I wrote about 10,000 new words for it, and I wanted to talk to her for it. And she was like so alive and tuned into today's music, tuned
How
into
old
her
how old is she
audience.
now?
She's got to be 77, I think. I think she's 2 years older than me. Yeah.
All righty. So
But,
she's still in her prime as far as I'm concerned.
well, it's
My
really
mom just
interesting.
had her, one second. My mom just had her 100th birthday
Oh, wow.
2 days ago, and Larry DeVoskin was there. So, and we'll be talking about Larry a little bit. Um,
Cool.
you've been part of every era from vinyl to streaming, from Zeppelin to AI. Has your philosophy evolved over the years, or has it stayed pretty much the same at its core?
Well, I mean, the personal philosophy, which is, championing artists I believe in, trying to make sure that the people I care about can make a living, and trying to be rational about the economics of what I'm doing. That's the broad strokes are the same. Of course, the business itself has changed dramatically. And so the philosophy of how to represent an artist has changed because technology has changed. Streaming's obviously very different.
Spotify, boo.
Well, I don't know. I have to admit, I listen to music on Spotify, and I do appreciate the fact that I can listen to whatever I want, wherever I want. The economics of it are complicated. Some artists have done very well with it, some have fared poorly with it. It's better than when the business was cratering and declining by 15 or 20%, which was true for the sort of 15 years before Spotify emerged. So at least it revived an economic underpinning to the value of recorded music writ
Did,
large. But the way the
question.
money is
Did,
divided up is, subject to flawed algorithms and greed. But it's still a better business to me with streaming than it was in the years immediately before it, when there was all this file sharing that meant the artists
well,
and the
I was
people
just going to
working
ask you. So,
together,
did
nothing.
Napster kind of usher in the beginning of the decline of the music business?
Yeah, it was Napster, and there was a site right before it called mp3.com, which was the first file sharing, where people were just able to rip digital information from CDs and send it to all their friends for free. And the recorded music business lost between 80 and 90% of its value between 2000 and 2014. So that made that the money just wasn't there to support, to pay for take risks on artists or marketing them, and thousands of people lost their jobs. It was definitely a crisis, And streaming, at least, is a temporary solution because it allows some monetization for
Yeah,
recording.
what is it? 4 cents per thousand streams?
I can never get my mind around it, but we do know that the reason that all of these artists, Springsteen and Dylan and, dozens of others have been able to sell their catalogs for a lot of money is because streaming increased the value. It's a winner take all economy, which is endemic of the society at large. We have the political side of me is a Bernie Sanders guy that's very worried about the disparity in wealth. And obviously, if you're Taylor Swift or Olivia Rodrigo,
You got
Billy,
nothing to worry about.
they're they're making quite a bit of money from streaming. We work with an artist from Montreal named Ash who makes hundreds of thousands of dollars a year from YouTube streaming, Egyptian, all that kind of a artist. So I mean, there is income from it. It's I don't love the way the algorithms distribute the money. I think there are biases built into it, and it's been particularly hard on songwriters. But it's a lot better than having no pie. It's one thing to say the pie is being divided up
So it's a
properly.
business of pennies now, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, it always was a business of pennies. I guess you could say when you bought a CD, you were spending, $10 or $15 for it. So in that sense, it was dollars. Of course, that money didn't all go to the artist. I mean, the record stores got half of it. And then of the remaining half, there was manufacturing costs and marketing costs. And the record company, depending on how greedy they were, how good a contract they were, made money. It's not like there were some people who did well under the old system. There were quite a few people that felt taken advantage of and underpaid in the old system also. I'm not aware of a perfect system. I've not been consulted. I'm not with a big company now where I have any input into how they do the algorithms. But the streaming has made the business better today than it was
20
50
years
years
ago.
ago. But of course, like all old geezers, I miss going to the record store and I understood the business a lot better when it was physical product.
All right,
But
well, we're gonna take a 2 minute break. We'll be right back with the incredible Mr. Danny Goldberg.
One baby, two, another says I'm lucky to meet you. I don't care what you think, this it is about me. It is now my duty to completely drain you. I travel through to blend up in your affection. Shooting for you, passing back and forth. In our passionate kiss, from my mouth to yours, I like you. With eyes to dilated, I've become your pupil. You taught me everything about a poison apple. The water is so yellow, I'm a healthy student. Indebted and so grateful, vacuum out the fluids. Shooting for you, passing back and forth. In our passionate kiss, from my mouth to yours, I like you.
We're back with Danny Goldberg. This is a multi-part question. It's going to take me a minute to get through it.
all
Let's
right.
talk about your book, Bumping in the Geniuses. The title is legendary. Originally a quote from Ahmet Ertegun, is it?
Erdogan. Yeah, Ahmet Erdogan.
Erdogan, yeah.
Yeah.
When a young David Geffen asked how to succeed in the music business, Erdogan said, just bump into geniuses. You've certainly done that from Led Zeppelin to Nirvana, Stevie Nicks to Allman Brothers. You've crossed paths with some of the greatest creative minds of the past 50 years. When you look back, who were the geniuses that truly stood out to you? A, B, the ones with the light shone just, or the ones where the light shone just a little brighter than the rest. And what was it about them, their energy, their sensitivity, their sense of truth, that made that made you recognize genius when you saw it? And
Well,
take your time with this one.
yeah, I certainly the people you mentioned. I mean, Stevie Nicks, Bonnie Raitt, the Allman Brothers, Led Zeppelin, extraordinary, brilliant artists. I always, if I'm asked, and I work with a couple of people now that I think are quite brilliant. Steve Earle, who I've worked with for the last 25 years, and Mike Scott of the Waterboys, and many others. I always go back to Kurt Cobain when I look at my own career as being one whose brilliance just separated him apart from all of the others
Our next
in
segment is going to be
in
all
my
about Kurt.
in,
So
in my in my experience. So I'll wait for you to talk about him, but he's in a category all of his own in terms of my experience. But there are brilliant people that aren't necessarily as big commercially, but who to me still are channels of a kind of a light and a beauty. Um, and I remember as a reviewer seeing the young Loudon Wainwright, the third play in the Village Gaslight to 50 people, or young John Prine, Christopherson. These aren't people that I worked with, but who I got to know a little bit by being a journalist, and whose brilliance still inspires me. I still listen to them today. But I don't know how to put it into words. It's there's some ability to connect with the inside of people, to go beyond the surface, which there's the pop ability, which is just have a catchy song or a memorable phrase or a great image or costume or graphic. And then there's the deeper kind of brilliance that's always inspired me, starting with an artist like Bob Dylan, but also, Billie Holiday's vocals, Louis Armstrong playing the trumpet,
Wes
great. So,
Montgomery on jazz guitar starting
yeah,
at 19 years old.
you know,
Unbelievable.
uh, that there's an ability to tune in with the part of the psychology of human beings that's deeper than just the surface thoughts and opinions, and can create some sense of community when you're in an audience. The classic being the old Grateful Dead audiences, but there's a million examples. There's this sudden feeling of connectivity, of being part of something bigger. It's not a religion where you're signing up for some
It's a
belief
collective
system,
consciousness, isn't it?
but it takes a person out of their own neurosis into a bigger consciousness, like what you're saying. And I think that there are certain artists that just have the ability to transmit that. And there's dozens and dozens of them of all ages. I only know the ones I know, and I'm only aware of the ones I'm aware of. I'm older. I'm not as tuned into the younger artists, but to me, that's the magic I gravitate to. And I think you've mentioned a lot of the ones that are high on my list of experiences of working with them. I probably forgot a few of them, but I think that the ability to touch people more deeply than just surface emotion is the thing that I am most attracted to.
Do you think genius announces itself early, or is it something you only see clearly in hindsight?
I think it depends on the artist. I think the people who saw Bob Dylan when he was 21 years old knew they were in the presence of somebody pretty special. I met Kurt Cobain when he was 27 or 26. People that I've spoken to who knew him earlier said it was quite apparent that he was very special at an early age. I think for musicians, late teens, early 20s is usually you see it. There are people who blossom later than that, but a lot
So it's
a
done for
lot of
me
the
at
greats,
71,
a
huh?
lot of the greats were identifiable in their early 20s.
Okay. Um, and what do you think separates true genius from simple talent? Is it vulnerability, work ethic, the ability to connect deeply with emotion?
Well, I think firstly, doing something new is part of it. I mean, there are people that are incredibly successful commercially, but they're basically synthesizing what came before them. So I think genius is people who take it to the next level, who do something that hasn't been done before, even though they may be dealing with the same notes on the scale, the same words in the dictionary. Um, and for me, what I'm attracted to is those kind of expressions that touch a deeper place, that get into what maybe we would call a spiritual place or a poetic place. It can be done through pure music, just instrumentalization. I mean, John Coltrane, like you're saying, Wes Montgomery, Miles Davis, Jimi Hendrix's guitar is certainly as important as any words he ever wrote. And the great lyricists can do it too, which I think Dylan, Christopherson, John Prine, Steve Earle, Stevie Nicks, others have been able to do it as poets. And the combination of the two is my favorite art form, great words and great music.
You've run both the management company and a record label with Gold Mountain under the Gold Mountain banner, management at Gold Mountain Entertainment, and in 1985 you served as president of Gold Mountain Records, which shifted distribution from A&M Records to MCA. What did you learn about the differences between nurturing artists on the management side versus breaking records from the label side?
Well, generally speaking, I mean, the labels that I'm really associated with when I work for bigger companies, Atlantic, Warners, and Mercury, like you're saying, and first of all, record companies are only concerned with records. It's obvious, but it's important to recognize that there's other forms of the music business, particularly touring and songwriting, which are very, very important. And record companies are only focused on the one product, the record. Record companies also have to think shorter term. When you're a manager, you're supposed to think from the artist's point of view of a whole career. Record companies are part of businesses and they have to think in terms of their quarterly and annual profits if they don't want to get fired. So you're thinking shorter term as a label. As a label executive at a bigger company, I was involved with a lot of artists, a little bit, whereas as a manager, I'm involved with few artists in a much deeper way. So when you're at a label, you're able to look at the records you have, and your job is to try to react to the ones that are, as they would say in the parlance of the old days, making some noise. You can't, it's a lot easier to make something that's already happening bigger than to just take something from zero and somehow create a fire around it. So, those are some of the differences. I don't know if that's detailed enough answer, but that's what popped into my mind initially when you asked the question.
Oh, it's plenty detailed, Danny. The next question is a sensitive one. You were close to Kurt Cobain, not just as his manager, but as a friend. Losing someone so young, so gifted, and loved must have been incredibly difficult. Uh, when you've walked alongside an artist who changed the world, how do you recover from that loss?
Well, I don't think it's that different from anybody else who's friends with or a family member of someone who killed themselves. I mean, suicide is just as painful, whether it's a famous person or somebody who's not famous, whether it's somebody who's brilliant or just somebody who's a human being trying to get by. It's a horrible thing to witness or to be involved with.
Do you have any
As
insights?
I'm sorry.
Do you have any insights into why Kurt ended his
Oh,
life?
I don't have any insights into why anyone kills himself. It's been, again, I think 60,000 Americans a year kill themselves, most of them male, a lot of them by guns. Um, a lot of artists this have killed themselves over the years, the great jazz artists and rock artists and painters and novelists, David Foster Wallace, you could go down the list. I don't know if there's something different when an artist kills himself than when someone else does. When I was in the wake of Kurt's death, I tried to read about, and even, when he was alive and I knew he was self-destructive and a drug addict, tried to read what spiritual leaders said about self-destructiveness, what psychiatrists said. no one knows why some people kill themselves and others find a way of pulling out of it. It's a mystery that, to my knowledge, no one has unraveled. It's a great tragedy for somebody who's that unhappy that they want to do that, and a great tragedy for the people that love them. Again, I don't think the pain is greater just
Any different.
because the guy that I was close to happened to also be a musical genius and very famous. I think it's exactly the same set of emotions that
And
people.
and and because of your point of view about this, I will put in the description of the YouTube video a link and a phone number to the suicide prevention hotline.
I think that's great, and I would say for people with addictions, whether it's narcotics or alcohol or other addictions, I'm a great believer in 12 steps. Kurt didn't take the 12-step program, but a lot of people that I know would tell you that they're alive today because of 12 steps. So there's suicide prevention specifically. I'm not an expert on it, but talking to somebody is better than not talking to somebody. And to the extent that people can force themselves into a 12 steps environment if they have addiction issues, that's the one thing that I know of that has a decent batting average of success.
Well, I'll add that too. In Serving the Servant, you painted a portrait of Kurt that's compassionate, deeply human, not the tortured version, not the tabloid version of the tortured rock star, but a real person with humor, kindness, and vulnerability. What do you most wish people understood about Kurt Cobain that the media missed?
Well, I think that the general media picture of him focused a lot on his death. It was a grotesque death. He shot himself in the head. It was unbelievably sad, a great loss for millions of fans and for hundreds of people who loved him. And but why we all cared about him was not because of the way he died, but because of the way he lived before he died, and in particular because of his art. So what I try to do in that book, and when I think about him, and as I'm speaking to you now, I'm looking at a picture of me standing next to him with a smile on his face, is this guy was his art was incredibly brilliant. He was also, and this isn't true of every brilliant artist, a very sweet guy. He was very kind to most of the people around him. He was prone to depression, and when he was depressed, he could be difficult. And he was a drug addict for a lot of his life. And in that
Was he
respect,
bipolar or
I
anything
mean,
like
I'm
that?
not a psychiatrist. I don't know these different terms. He definitely was prone to depression. Maybe it was bipolar. Maybe there's some other terminology for it. Uh, had a tough childhood, and he was just an incredibly sensitive character. Um, but he was a beautiful person. A lot of the time, he was when I did the book and just talked to dozens of people who knew him, people just gushed with loving memories of his kindnesses and his sense of humor. And of course, he was unbelievably gifted as a songwriter, singer, guitar player, and kind of a rock image maker. That doesn't mean he didn't have his dark, pissy moments, but I just think. I prefer to think of him alive than to think of him the way he died.
You've managed so many artists dealing with fame, mental health, and pressure. What have those experiences taught you about how we care for people who create the art that moves us?
Well, I mean, I think, as a society, we probably could do more to honor the value of art. I look at other countries. For example, I have some Canadian clients and do a lot of business with Canada, and they've had a long history of supporting their artists financially, especially in the developing years that we don't do in this country. And I just think that's a something I wish we did here. Uh, that doesn't mean artists should be accountable to moral standards. I mean, if an artist does something immoral or dishonest, they have to be accountable for it. But generally speaking, the way that they do things, to me, the more society can support that, the better, because I think it's a better world to live in with better art. Not everyone who wants to be an artist is going to move millions of people, but it'd be better if it wasn't such a struggle for people just to put food on their table while they're developing as an artist.
Tell me about it. Um, Looking back, what do you think Kurt's greatest legacy is? Not just musically, but emotionally and culturally.
Well, I think the music is the most important part of his legacy. That's what we can listen to and see. And there's some wonderful videos of him. I think he represented an alternative idea of masculinity that's really important. That you could be a rock star, which is one of the iconic roles, without being a macho jerk. I think that he made it cool to care about respect women and to be against the homophobia. So I think those were important cultural contributions that he made, particularly at the time and to that generation as a role model. But I think the music itself is the legacy, and it's really great. I listened every once in a while to some of his music, and it never ceases to dazzle me.
And with that, we're going to take our next 2 minute break. We're with Danny Goldberg. We've been talking about Kurt Cobain. And when we get back, we're going to be talking about Danny's book, Liberals with an Attitude, which I believe is about at least partially Rodney King. And yeah.
Yes, yes, it's about what happened in Los Angeles after the Rodney King beating was videotaped and shown on TV, and the struggle in the city to reform the Los Angeles Police Department and the people who were able to pull that off.
All right. Well, we'll jump into that when we come back. So this is a 2 minute break, and we'll be listening some music that was touched by Danny.
Tell them about it. Hit it where it hurts.
Hey, cool thing. Come here. Sit down beside me. There's something I gotta ask you. I just wanna know, what are you gonna do for me? I mean, are you gonna liberate us girls from male, white, corporate oppression?
Tell it like it is.
Huh?
We're back with Danny Goldberg. And now we're going to get into a long question. I want to talk about your new book, Liberals with Attitude. My friend Larry DeVoskin told me that you've always been a voice for justice, peace, and equality, and that even during your busiest years in the music industry, you never stopped standing up for what you believed in. You helped launch Air America Radio to counterbalance the dominance of right-wing talked media in the 2000s. And that was a pretty bold move for someone already so established in the entertainment industry. Tell me about the new book. What inspired Liberals with an Attitude, and how does it connect the dots between art activism and the world we're living in today?
I'm happy and grateful to talk about the new book, but let me just correct one thing. I didn't I wish I was enough of a visionary to have launched Air America Radio. I didn't. That was a friend of mine named John Sinton had that vision. He put it together. It was up and running for a couple of years. They needed a CEO at some point, and I took the job. Al Franken, who was one of the stars on Air America, asked me to do it. It was too late. It was heading into bankruptcy, and it crashed and burned 7 or 8 months later. But the vision, and John Sinton has his own social, newsletter, and he's a brilliant, brilliant guy. And it was really his idea. And then, of course, the talent on Air America, Rachel Maddow, Mark Maron, and Al Franken was amazing. And I didn't pick any of those people. John Sinton did. In terms of the book, goes back to before that in the early 90s, around the same time I was managing Nirvana. And in the years before that, I had gotten concerned originally with the idea of rock censorship. There were Al Gore's wife, Tipper Gore, and others in Washington wanted a rating system for lyrics. And I thought that would have really screwed up the business because then people under 18 couldn't get most of the rock and rap records.
Mm.
They had dirty, so-called dirty words in them. And I got involved with the American Civil Liberties Union at that time to try to fight that on a free speech basis. And because of that, I was asked in 1987 to be the chair of the board of the Southern California ACLU because I was living in Los Angeles at that time. And I quickly found out that they were involved with a lot of issues, that the free speech was only one of them. And one of the issues that they were particularly concerned of in LA at that time was police brutality and racism, because the Los Angeles Police Department did have a difficult history with regard to that, particularly under their chief at the time, whose name was Daryl Gates, who was kind of
Hmm.
a champion figure, very charismatic, popular with a certain segment of the population, and pretty unapologetic about being a racist. That doesn't mean that most of the LAPD officers were like that. I think it's a tough job being a police officer, and they deserve, most of them, a lot of respect. But they have a lot of power, and all you need in a department of thousands of officers is a couple of dozen to be racist and brutal, and you get things like the Rodney King beating. That beating happened in 1991, same year that Nevermind came out. But if you,
I lived in LA then.
yeah.
Fortunately, I was in Simi Valley, I think, but literally watched LA burn.
So the riots and the LA burning that you're talking about happened a year later after the initial acquittal of the four officers who beat Rodney King. What
Right.
happened is he was a black guy speeding, chased by a police car, and had too much to drink, and definitely should have been pulled over. Certainly should have been given a speeding ticket. Maybe should have been arrested if he was drunk driving or something like that. But instead, he was beaten by four officers with metal batons while 20 other officers surrounded them watching him. He was unarmed, never charged with a crime, I might add. And it happened to occur just as home video cameras reached a price point where regular people could afford them. Now we all have a camera in our phone, but that was not the case in the early 90s. And so a plumber who lived in an apartment building overlooking the place where Rodney King was beating had just gotten a camcorder for his birthday and decided to record this beating. And that grainy black and white video uh, was shown all over the world because it was the first time that that kind of police brutality had ever been documented in a way that, I mean, people who lived in poor neighborhoods knew it happened a lot, but most white people, and certainly including me, had no idea that that was routine behavior. The chief, whose name was Daryl Gates, who had a history of saying racist things and was hated by the black community, called it an aberration. But to the ACLU and the people that were dealing with police brutality, it was business as usual. It just was captured on video for the first time. And so I documented a 16-month struggle that was led by the mayor of LA at the time, Tom Bradley, who was also the first black mayor of the city. He was a political kind of moderate to conservative, very business oriented, but who had been a cop himself as a young man and who was aware of some of the pathology of the department at that time, had never wanted to have a confrontation with the police chief because the police chief had enormous power in LA. Mayor couldn't fire him. In order to solve the whole structural problem, there had to be a ballot initiative passed the year after the Rodney King beating to change the city charter so the mayor had some authority over the police chief. and conformed LA finally to whatever American cities did. And I was just fascinated by the way Tom Bradley pulled it off. He put together this coalition between the left and the center. Took 16 months. Very hard to sustain public interest in an issue like this. Fear of crime is real and for good reason, especially in those days. There was a crack epidemic and gang warfare. But the question is, how do you deal with that in a way that's not racist and that's not
Yeah, Compton was a scary place.
yeah. So, and of course, a lot of the hip hop dealing with the police, it all came out of LA because there was a unique pathology in the LAPD at that time, not in the whole department, but with certain officers. And that's where NWA comes from. It was their song, Can I Say Four-Letter Word?
Niggers with attitude. Yeah.
Yeah, fuck the police,
Yeah.
was their big song. It wasn't about police in general. It was about the LAPD. Daryl Gates, the LAPD chief, who we all worked hard to get out of power, was name checked in 15 hip hop songs. He was a uniquely powerful figure. He'd just been honored by
Polarizing,
what
polarizing, huh?
yeah, incredibly polarizing, and it was quite an effort to get rid of him. I wanted to document how it was done because I think there are some lessons for today, and I also think it's always worth shining a light on some heroes. So it's not about music, although there's a chapter about hip hop in it. It's not about me. It's really describing people that I was able to watch close up make social change on an issue that's usually intractable. So, it came out a few weeks ago. I'm so excited to be able to talk about it.
Yeah, you write about Rodney King's beating and the fight for the soul of Los Angeles. Those events shaped a generation's understanding of justice and inequality. How do you see the echoes in our society today?
Well, there's so many differences today. Obviously, the media is completely different. This medium that we're on today didn't exist then. Politics is different. Economics are different. Culture is different, but the deepest feelings that people have about race, fear of crime, balanced with a desire for justice for everybody, how politicians manipulate these things for good or for bad, those bigger things are still very similar, even while the externals of the media and politics are so different. And I think that to the extent that people could get to a deeper place of seeing shared humanity on the one hand and balancing the very legitimate need for safety from crime with the need to respect every human being, even if they look differently than us or speak a different language, those underlying issues don't change from generation to generation. So I like to try to find role models, and see what lessons you can learn. Certainly, the idea of the left and the center having to work together instead of being at each other's throats is similar. Bradley pulled that off in the early 90s. We'll see today if current Democratic leaders or others can pull it off today because there's so much infighting. There's the infighting between MAGA people and everybody else, but even within people that don't like Donald Trump, there's huge infighting between the left and the center. I'm doing this from New York City, where we have a mayoral election today, where I'm
That's right.
I'm an enthusiastic supporter of Zoran Mamdani, but a lot of Democrats are bitterly against him, and
So they want Cuomo.
Cuomo was at one time a Democrat. I don't know what he is now.
He's independent,
Whatever that means. Yeah, he's
whatever
independent
that means, right?
except for the support of billionaires who paid for his entire campaign. So
Yeah.
he's dependent of them. He lost the Democratic primary, so he had to run somehow. So, I'm as you can see, opinionated, but I want to live in a country where I can disagree with people and still recognize their humanity and be friends
Well,
with them.
this
And
brings up
that's what I think I'm worried about today is how to disagree, as the old saying goes, without being disagreeable.
mm-hmm. And this brings up my next question. And what actions can people take, real tangible actions, to bridge the divide, to bring not only America, but the world closer together?
Well, you're getting into the realm of, religion and, philosophy. And I'm just a rock manager who's written some books, but I think trying to find common humanity with people that you disagree with is worth the effort. You know, there's a knee jerk. When someone says something I disagree with, I want to argue. I'm trying to learn how to take a deep breath and say, okay, I can still hold to my opinion, but how do I respond in a way that recognizes that someone's a human being and not the enemy just because we disagree about an election or a policy. So I think individual acts of forbearance, tolerance, and kindness are the key to it. And then in the public eye, you make decisions based on what's available to you. I do think people should vote. I think if you can afford to make contributions to things you believe in, you should do it. Sometimes protests are valuable, sometimes they're not. But I just think basically, I go back, I'm a 60s kid. I go back to the Beatles. All you need is love. You know, I think the more
I'm
you
a 60s kid. We got something in common.
I think the more you can put love into your interactions, the better life you're going to have and the better the society will be. Easier said than done, but that's to me got to be the
So
aspiration.
a sense of community over they're different.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that question. Could you say it
It was
again?
I was a statement. It was just I was saying a sense of community over, oh, those people are different.
Well,
So
that's the fun thing. That's what I love about music. You go to a Springsteen concert, and I spoke to Springsteen for my previous book, and I worked with him a little bit years ago on the No Nukes movie that you mentioned. You know, there are Republicans there. There are people that like him that like Donald Trump. There are people that like him that hate Donald Trump. But they all love Bruce Springsteen. And it's not just him personally, it's the music, it's the spirit that he evokes through his music. And that sense of community to me is a model for the way I wish the society was. At least concerts give us a model of how people who have different religious beliefs, sometimes different ethical beliefs, and certainly different political beliefs can still share something that they love together. And that to me is one of the things I love about
art,
music.
music,
Yeah.
sports,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. I think you get that with sports too.
yeah.
I particularly love it in a great concert because you know that there are people in that auditorium or arena or stadium that you're going to disagree with about a million different things, but you're all singing along, and that's a good place to start.
You've always believed that music and culture have power, that they can heal and unite. Do you still see that potential today? Can artists and audiences alike help steer us back towards empathy and connection? And this is kind of a tag on to what we were just talking about.
Yeah, I think I look, I think Taylor Swift, for example, is a positive influence in the world. You know, I think she represents women more than, you know, she's a particular hero to women, but she's also a role model of how to be by all accounts, she's generous to the people around her. She's takes positions on political things without being polarizing about it, and she reminds everybody, you know, she makes everybody feel good with her music. So I think art's still one of the bright lights. I think religion can be, but sometimes religion can be used to divide people, sometimes to unite people. I prefer the uniting.
Okay, we're going to take our last 2 minute break. We'll be back with Danny Goldberg in just 2 minutes.
A friend of mine, she cries at night and she calls me on the phone.
We're back with Danny Goldberg, and we've had a good time. Danny, you've guided and mentored some of the most remarkable artists of our time, but today's music world is very different. And we're touching on something we talked about a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
100,000 new songs a day on Spotify, algorithms replacing A&R people, AI generated music starting to blur the lines of creativity. If you met a young artist today, or even an old one like me, someone with the spark, the star quality of Stevie Nicks or Kurt Cobain, what would you tell them?
Well, I'm certainly more tuned in to older audiences and older artists than I am younger ones because I'm older. But I do think that performing in front of people is incredibly important for the careers that I admire. I know you still perform for people, and I think that there are a lot of examples of people that have an individual song that goes viral and has zillions of streams, but then they can't sell 50 tickets at a
Yeah.
club because
Mm-hmm.
they haven't created that intimacy with an audience. That doesn't mean that you have to perform to have a good musical career, but for the kind of culture that I'm the most inspired by, whether it's young or old, I think the live connectivity between a live artist and a live audience has a unique amount of intensity. Of course, the songs and recordings are very important in creating interest. The two things go together,
So,
but I
so
think
you
younger
tell.
artists who've grown up on these computers, I just would urge them play in front of people. Do it as much
Well,
as you.
I was just going to say, so you would encourage me to get out of my living room and get into some venues.
I
I
will.
played the bar scene in Park City, and I said, no, this is not for me. So live streaming, I get 60 to 80,000 people per live stream, and I chop up my live streams into individual songs, and those get between 60 and 80,000 views. That's how I'm getting myself out there. But I feel like I need to get on the road if I'm going to make a difference in my own career.
Well, it's different for everybody, and it's very different in your 70s than in your 20s, obviously. Uh, Sorry about the street noise, but I'm in Manhattan as we speak. Um, but yeah, again, I really particularly appreciate people who can interact with live audiences. That's not the only way of making meaningful music. There's a many ways to skin a cat, as they say. But from my own personal interests and what I feel I know the most about and I'm most attracted to, the live interaction is sort of at the core of the careers that I'm the most inspired by. Springsteen being Exhibit A, but by no means the only example.
How does a new artist rise above the noise today?
Oh goodness, no two of them do it the same way. I mean, certainly, it's there's always been the situation from the time we were young till today where a lot of people who want to be artists just don't have the destiny or the talent or the magic or the luck to be successful. It's like not everyone who's great on their high school basketball team is going to be able to be in the NBA. So there were always 99 people who didn't make it in garage bands for one who did. And no two of them do it the same way. I do think YouTube is a particularly valuable tool because it allows artists for very little money to not only get their music out there, but to kind of make eye contact with a potential audience. And I think playing in front of people matters. I think understanding, getting to know your audience. A lot of people are very active these days, kind of communicating directly with their fans. No two people do it the same way, but one thing for sure, you can't be easily discouraged. Even the most successful artists deal with dozens and dozens of rejections and disappointments before they quote unquote make it. So perseverance is very important. Trying to keep questioning yourself if things aren't working to find something else that might work is important. I think being inspired by great artists and having them be role models is important. I think luck is important. but there's a mystery of talent. Some people just have the destiny to be successful artists.
A song I play every show is "Born Under a Bad Sign." So, uh,
Albert King.
yes, sir.
Yeah.
How can they build a career that's authentic, meaningful, and emotionally connected in a world that sometimes feels like it rewards the loudest voice over the truest one?
I think you just got to be true to yourself. Sometimes people have a loud voice, and sometimes loud voices can be used to great effect. I mean, Led Zeppelin was pretty loud, but they were really good. Um, but I think you've got to look inward and then see what works inward and where it connects with externally. If you try to just copy externally what people are doing, you'll always be half a step behind. So you got to start inside. You got to stick with it. Sometimes you have to just stick with it even when you're being rejected. And sometimes you need to learn from the rejection and make adjustments. There's no easy answers about this. If I knew those answers, I'd be a gazillionaire. But I think that
So then you can't answer this. Is there still hope for the new generation of musicians to find their voice
oh, there's hope
and
for
their
some of them.
audience?
There's
Uh,
hope for some of them. It was never the case where everybody who wanted to be an artist could find an audience. We all know people that had bands that played at high school dances that then had to be insurance agents or cab drivers or lawyers or doctors. But some of them will. I think there are vibrant scenes. The kind of music I identify with, a lot of it is happening in the Americana world. Some of it is happening in the electronica world. Some of it is, there's all different genres, but some young people are going to make it and some won't. It's always been that way. It's not like there was a
it's
higher.
a lottery, isn't it?
Well, it's not exactly a lottery because a lottery is completely based on luck. I think there's a sense of God-given talent.
Talent,
I think
luck,
hard
and
work, charm,
mhm.
and savvy help increase the odds. So it's a little more like uh, poker than it is like a lottery. There is a skill set you've got to bring to it, and that people with that skill set have a much better likelihood of making it, but you still got to get dealt some good cards.
All
Luck
right.
is
Well, before we wrap up, I'd like to end things on a hopeful note. You've lived through the greatest revolutions in music, politics, and culture, and through it all, you've stayed committed to optimism and purpose, right? Right. So tell me, what three things you're hopeful for, either personally or for the world? Oh, and what gives you faith that we can create a better tomorrow for artists, for audiences, and for humanity? Two-part question.
easy ones though, right? Just
Yeah, I saved the easy ones for
yes, yeah,
last.
yeah, yeah, save the easy ones. I'm a guy who prays. I was a 60s kid. I was inspired by kind of the psychedelic idea of, peace and love. And, I just try to look at the great beings throughout history, whatever some people are into religious figures. I like most religious figures that are famous. Some are just into artists, some are into ideas. But I just think you gotta look to the brightest lights and aspire to be a companion of those bright lights, whether it's people that are alive or who lived at other times or who live in other planes. I just do have a basic optimism about the human spirit, but I also recognize there are very dark aspects of the human spirit. We're a species that's got a lot of activity that's not that great. But I just I think try to be a decent person, listen to great music, try not to lose my temper, try to forgive quicker instead of slower. Just all the old verities I think still apply today. Just filtered through rock and roll passion and whatever. You're dealing with the big philosophical issues, and I would go to the big philosophers. But you can do a lot worse than listen to great artists. That's if you're not comfortable with any particular spiritual path, at least identify with great art, because it's kind of a lantern in the future that you can point yourself towards.
Danny Goldberg, record executive, journalist, manager, author, activist, and truly a champion of the artist. It's his latest book, Liberals with an Attitude, is available now from Akathic.
It's all right, and it's available. That's the main point. Danny Goldberg, Liberals with Attitude.
Danny Goldberg, Liberals with an Attitude. Go out and buy it. And also in 2026 will be the expanded edition of Bumping into Geniuses and diversion books, but just go out and buy it. Danny, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a privilege. And I am sure that my subscribers are going to eat this up. So until next time, keep listening, keep creating, and keep the music first. Stay with me for a minute, Andy. Stay with me for a second.